notes on Jeffersonian democracy. So many liberals that I've spoken to in particular discount Jeffersonian democracy as a obsolete agrarian vision that was ripped apart by industrialization. But to counter I think this is people who don't understand the concepts of Jeffersonian democracy at all, and I now have proof, because the basic concept is you need citizens that are self-reliant, which means that they are able to earn their own living in a non-alienated fashion, which is what Karl Marx talked about. Karl Marx became radicalized, studying English peasantry that had been turned off their lands so nobles could raise sheep. Then they were turned into vagrants, branded with V's on their foreheads, and being homeless was illegalized, which is an outrage. So the concept of alienation is that you are powerless over greater forces. You can lose your job, you can lose your house, you can lose your retirement, you can lose your medical care. It's precisely what's going on with us. And the vision of Jeffersonianism is a citizenry that cannot easily be alienated because they're largely self-sufficient. Now, the technical means of achieving that at the time was the yeoman farmer. But today, the method to have a self-sufficient citizenry will require looking at modern technology. So, for example, an example of this is the 3D printer. 3D printers, you can now buy a machine that you can hit a button and it will print a dress or a pair of pants for you, basically. To be continued. So where do these ideas come from? Jeffersonian ideas of the self-sufficient yeoman farmer. The agrarian theory with which the Virginians' names have been so closely identified was one of the most common political doctrines of the Enlightenment. It was also one of the most ancient theories in its origin. It had been cast into fairly definitive form by Aristotle, and all the elements that the Greeks included are to be found substantially unchanged in the Virginians' reordering of the dogma. Aristotle's agrarianism was in part an economic theory, in part a theory of human psychology, in part a scheme of ethical values, but above all was a hypothesis of how to base a stable government on popular suffrage, with a society composed of self-sufficient, economically independent farmers whose way of life was a golden mean of virtue. Between riches and poverty, it would be possible, the Greeks claimed, to set up a republican government exempt from the class struggle. So, where do the ideas of Jeffersonian democracy come from? This is a sort of a tree. We have Socrates, Aristotle, and John Locke, who was the first one who came up with the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The government was for the benefit of the governed, not for the king. David Hume came up with some of the ideas about capital markets. And then, of course, James Madison wrote in the Federalists, so it's really Jeffersonian, Madisonian concept, which is anti-federalist in nature, which is to say, by anti-federalist, federalism involved creating a very powerful centralized power structure with elites that ran industry and banking and were fairly arrogant. This would be the way the Jeffersonian would describe the Hamiltonian, although they had as much in common as they had separate in their hope to create an American nation.